On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1971. We're going to be taking a look at Andy Williams, and he's going to be performing Where Do I Begin? Love Story. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. So as always, there's a link in the description below if you guys want to watch this the whole way through without me interrupting it, because I am going to be jumping into this, and as always, I have isolated the vocal and put it through the pitch monitoring software. So we'll have a listen through. I'll probably take the instrumentation down a little bit so that we can hear the vocal a little bit more clearly, but let's get everything up on screen and see how Andy gets on.
Where do I begin to tell the story of how great a love can be? The sweet love story that is older than the sea. The simple truth about the love she brings to me. Where do I start? With her first hello, she gave a meaning to this empty world of mine. There'd never be another love, another time. She came into my life and made the living fine.
I'm just going to jump in here just to mention something first of all before we get into the analysis. From a technical perspective, it sounds like on the S's, as I'm sure you guys have noticed, they are distorted, because generally with live performances and in the studio, you will have a de-esser on the microphone or applied to the vocal afterwards, which is exactly what it sounds like. It eliminates the sharpness of S's so that they don't, burst your eardrums. But here it seems like it's been really over compressed, so we're getting a bit of distortion. We have seen Andy on the channel before, I believe in a performance with Simon and Garfunkel, and you guys can check that out independently if you want to. That video I will leave a link to at the top of the screen now. But he's got this super smooth vocal sound, and it's so balanced all the time. And what I want to point out actually about his vocal, I'll let it play on.
Sweet love story that is older than the sea. The simple truth about the love she brings to me.
We want to make a mental note here of this B2 that Andy's just hit, because we're going to need that for later on as a reference point for the range that we're covering. But you'll see this really controlled vibrato that we get from Andy, and sometimes it'll be more dramatic, sometimes it'll be subtle. He really does mix it up, but it's always under control. And when you see the vocal like this, this is a little bit more dramatic, and when we listen to it in slow motion, you'll be able to hear that vibrato going kind of above the note and below. So he still has that really subtle drama. Is that the C going up there, and here we can see that we are we're going to be the A sharp 3 there, so we are a fair amount above the note, whereas normally you'd see this vibrato either directly over the line, or some people just hit the note C and go down C, and you get that kind of sound. It's a lot more subtle, but interesting that it's still so smooth to listen to because of the frequency, the evenness of the vibrato, but just the balance, that even sound in his voice, that it's not too much out of the mouth, it's not too piercing, but it's not too nasal either. It's got this really nice smooth tone and you can just listen to it all day. Just having a look at the pitch accuracy as well. Of course, this is something that Andy had down and, sounded pitch perfect all the time.
Where do I start?
Like that, just up to that C4 with the Where do I start? You know, he's just going up there very quickly, but absolutely nails it. And when I say about where do I start singing that line, it just reminds me of a little bit of trivia that this song, I mean, for the Love Story movie, it was an instrumental. It didn't have any vocals in there because Paramount, who were making the movie, didn't like the lyrical content that was originally written for it. So they just did away with the singing and had it as an instrumental, and it was very popular as an instrumental. But then they did get the lyrics rewritten by the person who wrote them in the first place, and that was Carl Sigman. And I mean, Carl was really disappointed that they didn't like his, you know, initial idea for the song, the lyrics that he had written. When he was asked to rewrite the lyrics, he did actually do it. And he said to his wife, because he'd already done the whole song, he said to his wife, where do I begin? You know, but then he thought, well, the rest is history. So he thought, where do I begin? Literally asking his wife that question, and those became the words that he then started to write into the whole song. Something that we've mentioned about other great singers is this delivery that they have in their talking range, and this is certainly what we get from Andy in this performance, or at least at this stage of the performance, because we really are going to move on with the performance, and let's get back to where we were and resume.
She fills my heart. She fills my heart with very special things.
And I love that transition. I'm going to take that back because we started this vocal in quite a light place and then quite a head voice place.
She fills my heart.
There with that heart. You know, it's quite light.
She fills my heart.
And now when we're starting to open up, and obviously the instrumentation in the background is leaning into it a little bit more dynamically, we're opening up. And that's exactly what we get from the vocal as well.
She fills my heart.
So you hear on heart, he goes, she fills my heart. And that really open vowel, and just has that ability to just push on that accelerator a little bit, and it has such an emotional impact. It really does lift the performance. I mean, not only pitch wise, as we can see, that's going to have an effect on you emotionally anyway, raising the pitch up suddenly, but then by the way that the note is delivered, it has that double impact, because now we're on a really open vowel from the previous section where we were really light in that head voice space.
She fills my heart.
Na, 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 na. You know, really light in there.
She fills my heart with very special things.
And the tone is so silky smooth all the way through Andy's range.
With angel songs and
even there, songs. He went into that open vowel, and it's very much all on the R vowel here. Even in the songs, the song, he kind of does that. So it's quite open and then closes it off at the end.
angel songs.
Sa. It's an R sound. Sung. And then that's where he just kind of closes his soft palate so it becomes nasal. Songs. So then it starts to sound like an O.
And wild imaginings. She fills my soul with so much love that anywhere I go, I'm never lonely.
But it's great because even on that go, you know, which is that O sound, which is really closed off and can be more difficult to sing when you're getting up in your range, but still keeping that vowel sound so pure, it just sounds great because it's not like with a different vowel his voice changes, it's still got that same expression and that same tone.
With her along, who could be lonely?
And listen to that change in dynamic. We've totally changed now back to almost a talking voice.
I reach for her hand.
And it gives you that impression and has the effect of seeming reflective. Singing this way means you feel reflective about what you've just heard that was more emotionally impactful in that chest voice. So real subtlety here. Obviously, when you're analysing it, it's great to dive into this, but when you're listening to it, it just takes you on that emotional journey.
It's always there. How long does it last? Can love be measured by the hours in a day? I have no answers now, but this much I can say.
And just a quick mention about, I know that we've said the accuracy of the notes, but when we're looking at this composition, the vocal, how it jumps from, the D sharp 3 here up to the C4, it's not like we're just covering, a tone and, semitones. There's a hell of a jump. So you've got that na 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 na, you've got to hit those notes all the time. Of course, Andy does seamlessly. And yeah, he does actually lean into that chest voice a little bit more at the bottom. You can see that D sharp 3. But this first phrase.
How long does it last? Can love...
How long does it last? Can love, and he kind of can love, really puts a little bit more into that chest voice, but then lightens up again by the end of the line.
Be measured by the hours in a day.
And again, really consistent vibrato, but by changing the dynamic approach vocally, it means that you're constantly leaning in to hear the quieter sections and then you're leaning back a little bit. It's all about effectively keeping you in the performance and taking you into that performance, but constantly changing your interest effectively. Because if it was all sung at one level and it was na 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 na, it would be like you're not moving, you're listening to it, but you can just hear everything at the same level. And to compare this with music production, it's where music sometimes is too compressed, which means that the lowest value and the highest value in terms of volume are brought closer together so that it's just like, a block of sound. So you don't get that dynamic effect, or at least that it's been reduced. Whereas when you leave all of the dynamics in there, this is what happens. You have quiet sections where you're wanting to hear it. So you obviously don't lean in because the speakers, if you're wearing headphones as well, you don't have to lean in. But it does have that effect of your mind leaning in. Don't think of it as your body. I mean, that's just a good kind of way to imagine what's going on, listening into something because it's quiet, and then when it's louder you lean back. The louder they are, the more you are affected by it. I've said before, when somebody shouts in your face, you are definitely emotionally compromised, but you are emotionally affected by that. If someone shouts in your face, if somebody's whispering, it's a totally different situation and a totally different emotional response. So those are obviously real world examples, but an exaggeration, but to help you understand what's happening when somebody does this vocally. When you're listening to a great singer, they're doing this all the time. Let's get back into it.
I have no answers now, but this much I can say. I know I'll need her till the stars all burn away, and she'll be there. How long does it last? Can love be measured by the hours in a day?
love this key change into the F sharp 4. So, I mean, talking about range, we haven't even looked at our piano on the left-hand side yet. But when we're talking about that F sharp 4, we've got here the F sharp 4, you can see the F4, they kind of line up. I've drawn them on the piano, the notes, or at least, you know, up and below, or above and below, so you guys can see where the notes are. And you'll see that top end of the male tenor range here. And let's go back to the B2 that we mentioned earlier, because it's all the way down here. So when we're, you know, at this B2, we're now all the way up here, and you know, the B2, we're talking about the baritone range here, bottom end of, and then we're now towards the top end of the male tenor range with that F sharp 4. So it gives you an idea of the amount of range we're covering. And here, let's take it back, because listen to this F sharp 4.
Does it last? Can love be measured by the hours in a day?
So you can hear that this isn't a light head voice configuration. It's not falsetto. He's leaning into this. He's belting it out.
Can love be measured by...
And even going up to the G4. He's still got that, you know, leaning into that chest voice sound, which is great.
By the hours in a day, I have no answers now, but this much I can say. I know I'll need her till the stars all burn away, and she'll be
And when we're talking about dynamic control, take a look at this last note, and obviously the ability to hold the note for so long, the breath control, and the support that he's got with his voice, where he can lean into that chest voice, but also here where he can go for this lighter configuration. But remember, we were just up at a G4 and we were leaning into it with chest voice. And it just shows you that he can do anything with these notes. Even belting in this same range with chest voice, but then going into this super clean head voice.
burn away, and she'll be there.
I mean, it's so cool because it's be there. You know, it's really light. I mean, I was maybe a little bit too light there, but it's great when you compare it to what we've just heard with that chest voice. So now maybe you can hear the difference between those two notes and how now it is like you're leaning back because you're just appreciating this expression that we've got at the top end of his range. But then by the time we get to the end, we have this really light. And that's probably similar to what I did a second ago, where I was really light with that F sharp 4. And he's still got that vibrato all the way through. Look at the pitch accuracy, bang on the F sharp 4. So just total control here throughout the whole performance. But I do want to get into a little bit of Andy's history and career just to finish off this video. And going all the way back, he actually served until the end of World War II with the United States Merchant Marines. He had 3 older brothers, which he then got together with to start the Williams Brothers Quartet. And that was in 1938. So he only would have been 11 years of age. And they performed on the radio like, you know, really everyone did back then. That was the way that they made their way into music. But then in 1943 is when he sang with Bing Crosby, and that was on Swinging on a Star, and that was in 1944. So Andy appeared in musical films for the next few years, and that was a huge move because being on radio is great, but getting your face in the movies and being seen obviously gives you a lot more exposure. So he and his brothers were signed by MGM for for the purpose of appearing in movies, but unfortunately Bob, his brother, was drafted into military service, so MGM then rescinded that offer and that contract, and Kay Thompson, who was the head of the vocal department at MGM, signed the remaining three brothers to sing with her choir, and they appeared on many movie soundtracks. But Kay and the boys moved on, and they became Kay Thompson and the Williams brothers, and in 1947 they were playing in Las Vegas, and they were hugely successful there. Over a very short time period, they really did take off, to the point where they became the highest paid nightclub act in the world at that time. So 1953 is then when they went their separate ways, but Kay was still involved heavily with Andy and managed to open doors for his career. So Kay also did some composing and arrangements for Andy, as well as getting him on TV, which is great. He was a featured singer for 2 years on Tonight, starring Steve Allen, and that's because the producer of that show was Kay's previous personal assistant, so that helped. She also managed to get him a record deal at Cadence Records because the owner of the record label owed Kay a favour. The exposure that he was getting on TV was obviously helping a lot, and in 1962 he performed at the Academy Awards and he sang Moon River, and that went down very well. So he then decided to record that. They put it on an album with other movie themes, and that album was massively successful. It got to number 3 in the charts, and it stayed in the charts for 3 years. So he was doing very well, and in 1963 he released another album, and that was called Days of Wine and Roses and Other TV Requests, and this was at the time where he had his own TV show, and this was between 1962 to 1971, I believe, so a 9-year stint. And I mean, yeah, over the next 10 years with the TV show, he was just massively popular and had huge success. I did mention about him being huge here in the UK, and in fact in 2007 he had a sold out tour here, and in December of that year, It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year got to number 21. So he had, a bit of a resurgence in the UK charts then. But anyway, thank you guys for requesting this video for me to take a look at. As always, keep those suggestions and requests coming in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you did enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!